Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Fox Forum. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Tom Silio, and we'll be talking about his experiences from the battlefield to the boardroom, and sort of unpacking what it takes to secure data at mission speed. So, before I ask you to introduce yourself, Tom, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Jack. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. So, would you mind just kicking us off with a bit about your experience? Obviously, you work at Everfox now. I relatively new hire, I think. We've only met the one time, not on Zoom. Um, so, yeah, what are you doing at Everfox, and what have you been doing for the past 10, 20 years? 'Cause I think it's going to form a good basis for this discussion.
Yes, so I spent the past 22 years in the United States Army as a signal officer doing technical operations and bringing data and information to people to make the right decisions. At the service level, at the joint level with White House Communications Agency, and in the Army Special Operations and Intelligence community, where people bring mission relevant data to make decisions and share with partners as appropriate. Uh, After having a great time doing that and realizing that the next chapter is in store, I transitioned out of the military and then took a search for where I could use those talents to secure data and ensure that the right information gets to the right place at the right time. And that's how I found Everfox. They'd been one of many partners over the years that we'd worked with. And I wanted to bring that operational experience to industry to try and push things a little bit faster because the demand is there for secure data access and transfer at the speed that it's coming in to get to the right people to make decisions.
Absolutely right. The demand is there. Um, so when you compare, so you obviously you worked in the military for a long time, um, and if you don't mind me saying, two decades possibly.
Yes.
Okay. Not trying to age you. Um, what do you what do you see differently that's happening now, with sort of different in the way data influences command decisions, that sort of thing? What's different now than it was 20 years ago or 15 years ago, we'll say?
Yeah, Jack, it's the volume and velocity of data and sensors that are coming in. 20 years ago, we were still talking in kilobytes per second in connections and links. So the command and control, the ability to talk to people, make decisions, and direct them was often done through voice. So you would explain the who, what, where, when, and why to someone that you needed a task and purpose accomplished. And the information was internalized by a person, whether it was a staff officer or a commander, and they would do their best to synthesize the information and give direction, normally through vocal orders, sometimes written down for the broader things, but to make quick decisions at speed were done by people using the information they were able to ingest. Over the past 20 years, the speed that that information is coming in, whether it's connected platforms, the fuel gauge is no longer just an
Yeah.
analog sensor to tell you how much fuel is in your vehicle. All of those things come in digitally now. And when you synthesize the information using automation and not even getting to the point of applying AI to it, just providing a dashboard that takes the information and can inform someone at speed, now that decision-making cycle is dependent on the data that you're receiving, which before was verbally presented to you by someone, or looking at a map that you'd drawn on with a pen.
Yeah.
Now you're looking at a digital map board that has automatic tracking and movement of people, things, items, the enemy, the situation, threats against you, and friendlies that could support you. And that's all a tremendous amount of information that comes in.
Yeah, so it's so we've gone from pen and paper and phone call to like some actual digital dashboards.
Yes.
I think that brings me some comfort.
Well,
Um,
so I think one of those key things there is the amount of information coming now and who needs to use it. So when a leader that is moving people into a position, and in the military that is, to a place of safety or a place to conduct an attack or an operation, that information can be overwhelming. Do they need all the factors that are coming? Someone does. When I have 10,000 feeds coming in and I could watch all the video from all these different platforms, do I need to see those things to make the right decision is one of those questions. And depending on your role, the information that you need is different.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that's an interesting inflection point. So it's not only the speed the data's coming in has increased over the past 20 years, it's also the amount of data coming in has increased exponentially over the last 20 years. And essentially what you're saying is what we've done to fix it or to bridge that gap is increase our reliance on technology. But then there's still that one person at the top who needs to make the call, correct?
Yes. So there's still, the CEO, the decision maker that is
Yeah.
directing where to go. And below that, people have guidance that they're making their own decisions, whether it's to get logistics, to get fuel, ammunition, sensor out there. What if someone needs to respond to a threat like a incoming rocket or artillery to defend the troops and the people that they're around? Before, that was a single platform that had its own radar that could detect and engage, and we were impressed by that back in
Yeah.
2007, 2008. We had automated response to shoot down a threat coming at you. Now that's a network of sensors that can get deeper range, see threats earlier, prevent them. And when you hear about the air defense uh, networks that are out there, that has to be secure data in transit from one to another. And one of the challenges comes when you're in a coalition or multinational environment and you have many different sensors operated by different
Yeah.
countries, being able to share that data at speed so that you can deter a threat or prevent something from happening or take action when that occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. I really want to ask a question about AI, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to save it for later. Um, so I want to tap into your experience a bit more here. Um, can you give me an example of a real sensor to effector scenario that either well, if you can give us an example, whether you can say it or not, of sensor operational picture, decision, and then the effector. Can you give us a run through of a real world
So
example that you've been a part of?
I'll give one from a joint training exercise that simulated this, working with partners. So a multinational force that has their own uh, radar systems between different countries, each capable of different amounts of tracking, and a threat which is simulating a drone attack from the adversary coming at you, is detected by one country who is not in a position to engage it. They're off side, to the side, yet it's heading toward a command post at a lower altitude than their radar can detect it. It's
Okay.
been it's been identified, it's shared. Early, before we connected the sensors cross nations, that was sent in message traffic across a multinational partner environment network that said there is something coming. Now it is in a chat, it's in a voice, and it's a dot on a map that is being
Yeah.
manually placed there by someone to share across that network, so that then the US is in a position to say, I know something is coming. I've been told that this attack drone is coming toward me. Let me prepare my people and tell them, be ready to respond as soon as it comes in sight of our capability. As we work through that sovereign data boundary between nations, which could have US unclassified, that's controlled, national sensitive, UK
Yeah.
official sensitive, French, Polish, I'm focused on the European theater for the exercise. When you have this multinational partner environment where we have a NATO, but we also have coalition elements in it that are not part of that NATO network, that sharing of data when you're unsure of the boundary at line speed, when somebody's life is on the line and you know that you can help protect them, we generated a sharing mechanism across that boundary that said, when it is sensor data, we have determined that we can share it at line speed. So now we're taking sensors between different nations, connecting them, and that way the effectors can take action to use electronic warfare, jam the engines, controlled landing of that platform, or do something kinetic with shooting it down with a surface-to-air missile or something else, depending on what assets are available. That decision chain now still has a challenge because do I use a $500,000 interceptor on a $200
Yeah.
drone? That decision making now needs additional information and layers because the impact and threat of something when it's moving at that speed, the decision making has to be done very quickly. And that sharing of information across boundaries needs something. And that's where things like cross-domain solutions are able to protect sovereign data, but still share what's shareable. And at the same time, do I trust the information coming in?
Yeah.
Because in the zero trust architecture, I don't really trust you until I validate the data that's coming, that it is accurate and that it matches what I'm supposed to be receiving, so that someone isn't putting unnecessary information or malicious information into that command channel. So that security between partners and nations is critical just at the data layer there. And especially when we talk drones or rockets or missiles coming in, the speed at which that information has to move has to be faster to drive a decision than whatever's in the air.
Yeah. So in the old world, it was too slow. It's all about speed. And now that we've connected basically MPs, are there, correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, but how have you actually gone about connecting the systems so that they can talk to each other better? Are you allowed to say that?
So people are still working on the right ways to do it,
Yeah.
whether it's a trusted network that is shared between partners or sovereign networks, which is really what we want to get to,
Yeah.
that then can share the data across. In Europe, we have Asterisk data as the standard for the radar, so you can process it when you receive it. When you bring in additional sensors and effectors, that ability to translate the information that you receive from one, and we're speaking multiple different languages in real life. We speak even more in computer world. So
Yeah.
when the digital world is taking the information and having worked those things before they become an issue, it's key so that you've solved that data translation and that data security problem in transit. Because we can't always just be on the same network, or we can't necessarily
No.
reach back to sanctuary. The cloud is a wonderful thing.
So Tom, you mentioned zero trust in a different architectures with different coalition partners. Does how different coalition partners view zero trust and how their security postures might differ, does that affect data coming between all the different partners?
So yes, it does, because everyone has a different implementation. And when we have one network that we're fighting on, we can share that security posture across it. When we're crossing those boundaries, you have to share what your attributes are of the information, and then translate those into the next security architecture as you bring in and ingest the information that's been shared with you. So that challenge of the boundary between sovereign nations or sovereign networks, even if it's one service in the military to another in the same country, sometimes they have different security postures and different tools running on it that
Yeah.
might be encrypting the data in a different way, or not have the same public key infrastructure or ICAM, identity credentialing and access management tools running on it. So at those boundaries, we need to translate those from one to the next.
Yeah. And so that, I imagine, increases, well, with all these coalition partners, also increases the amount of sensor inputs you're getting. Can you trace the origin of a sensor input from
Uh,
between different partners?
so I think we talked about an example of the radar detection of
Yeah.
something or another sensor. So I like radar because there's a standardized format that people are using in many cases that then we can screen as we pass it across. Does it meet the form? Does it give you the right information? Is it in the schema that it's supposed to be in? So that when radar data is tracking something, you can know where that source that was tracking it was detecting it, and then hand that off from one to the next. So that architecture is a great one to just use as an example, because that sensor may be owned by Poland or Ukraine or the United States or the United Kingdom. And it may be different services too, but when we go to share that information, we've got standard ways to share it. A different one would be video. And I
Yeah.
want to share a real-time video that I have of a target, and I have cursor on target information that says what I'm looking at a specific grid, and I'm kind of recognizing something. When I share that between nations, often having the same application to use to interface with it is key, and is probably faster than translating that video and the metadata that comes with it that points at a specific thing, has an identity on it. We've done some sort of visual recognition of that to say whether it's friendly or enemy. That tagging on the map that's being shared becomes a challenge when we cross boundaries.
Yeah. So you can validate your radar. You can validate radar, but obviously you need to be able to validate the video feed.
Yes. So
All right.
validating
And
the data as it comes in for the integrity that was there is one of those critical components to know whether, before I take action on something and say, I'm trusting your sensor or what you sent to me, to say that that's a threat before I go shoot that threat, or before I do
yeah,
something that could cause harm to a person. I want to be absolutely sure that what I'm going to do is the right thing. And so that validation of the data, that zero trust, now I'm going to validate,
yeah.
is key.
What if um what if a sensor itself is compromised? So I'm thinking like geo spoofing or manipulated signals, something like that. Like if that does happen, how quickly can that sort of corruption just mess with the whole decision chain?
So that's actually a great one that we've seen, is that if I have a sensor that is the only thing I have and it's being corrupted, and I'll use uh, a made up example. If its GPS is being spoofed so that I think that I'm in a different location, and then I'm thinking that the target coming at me is in a different location, the threat against me that I want to take a kinetic action against is not where it really is. Before I'm doing a call for fire or request for support and having someone launch giant exploding rounds at that thing that I think is a
Yeah,
threat, when I am just on my data that's local to me and it is corrupted, I'm making the best decision with what I think is right. When we have this as a network sensor architecture, it'll say, I kind of see the thing over there, but it's not where you are. And now my level of confidence in my sensor goes down. And we can automate that display by correlating the information coming from different sensors, because now I don't just have the one feed of my set of eyes on the target. Now other people have their sets of eyes digitally and through sensors,
yeah.
telling me that what I'm seeing isn't really the full picture. I'm being deceived here. Now I can take action and start to look for other remediations. And by using, triangulation in that case to say, I'm off. Now my level of trust in my sensor goes down until I reestablish that.
So it's another question of validation there. But then when does the sort of the speed become a bit of a liability, right? Like
When does it become
you
too much?
yeah, so I don't know, like you need to make decisions quickly, obviously. If you can't necessarily always validate or to the extent that you would want to, can you ever roll back those decisions that you make, the effect decisions? Is that possible?
So depending on what action you're taking, yes.
Yeah,
But the goal of sharing data and sharing it quickly is to help those informed decisions take place with the best information available at the time. And that goes across the military to civilian markets, where more information, if I'm using the right information for the right purpose, I can make a great decision. But if I'm being overwhelmed and inundated with too much information that I can't myself process, or my computer can't process all of it, the cutting room floor is full of too much that I don't find that needle in a haystack that I'm looking for, or that accurate piece of information to take real action on. And
yeah,
by the time that I've gotten to it, the threat has already passed or hit, or something bad has happened. If I am looking at a paper map driving down the road and I'm reading it and I'm behind the speed that the vehicle is moving, I'm going to say, turn right here. And it's like, well, that exit is
Too
already
late.
passed. Your right turn is too late. You have too much information coming in to make that good decision.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a nice segue. You mentioned uh sort of commercial in the commercial world. Are there any non-military examples of sensor to decision chains? Like, is it mirrored anywhere that we might see in just a practical world? Well, not a practical world,
So,
non-military. We'll leave it at that.
well, yes, it is. And I think this gets to, securing data where it's generated and then sharing it with, authenticity and verification is key. So we see in, international air traffic control, they're handing off, planes between towers and different sensors. We have things like ADS-B that transmits the location of an aircraft. If your sensors on your platform are accurate and it's at the correct altitude, you're transmitting your location. Other planes can see it and make informed decisions before they encounter you. And that's two forms of data that are being shared between aircraft to keep a tragedy from happening when you're sharing your location information and your azimuth with another aircraft. That keeps you out of one another's airspace and prevents a plane crash from happening. But before it happens, because the pilots are alerted to that sensor. When
Yeah,
you start to layer other data fields and sources, whether it's visual augmentation, you can now identify other things because uh, at some airports they're able to see the geese that are landing versus swallows. And when they start to have birds come in, instead of having to always just send a dog out there to chase them away, you can inform pilots of what's going on and make decisions because the airplane can't detect a goose.
yeah,
Uh, but if the airplane is being fed that we are identifying that you're on a collision course with an entire flock of giant birds that's going to break your windshield. When you can share that information at speed and not have to go through the human in the loop to pass that information as a threat vector, where right now the ground sees it, identifies it using camera systems today.
yeah,
And then that air traffic control has to relay that verbally to a pilot who has to acknowledge it. That could pop up on the planes that it applies to, and be something that is in the system of making a decision. We'll see that in autonomous vehicles because the
mhm,
battlefield is doing that very quickly, where the autonomous vehicles are at the forward line of troops. If you read the news reports on what's happening in Ukraine today, um, they are fewer people are controlling more territory using drones and autonomous vehicles to move supplies and move defense sectors across the edge and take action upon their adversary. So when you watch that with the Russian and Ukrainian forces and say that automation is now sharing information and has to be controlled, and you don't want to have your autonomous vehicle compromised by the adversary,
yeah,
and you don't want your drone to turn back around and attack you. You want to use it as defense. When we then use that same lessons learned at the forward line of troops to then apply to autonomous vehicles in our national inventory, driving down a highway, you want to protect the platform. You want the sensors to fuse with one another. You want to share data at some point between vehicles because mine may not see what's in front of the vehicle in front of me. But if I can be alerted to a rapid slowdown on the highway or an obstacle in the road before I get to it, a smooth lane change and a smooth slowdown early, as opposed to slamming on the brakes at the last minute
yeah.
and causing a pileup, is the same type of data sensor integration from platform to platform that we're seeing on the battlefield today.
But would it be correct to say that it's then possibly easier in practical terms to apply it to a non-military world because you can it's easier to share data or trust data, I should say.
So when we see the platforms that are out there that can, scan license plates and then tell you what the speed on the highway is going to be based on when
Yeah.
people pass. Those are great things to be able to do. The challenge comes in, one of the biggest challenges with data sharing is, especially in the multinational environment, is the data sovereignty and policy and regulation that goes behind it.
Right.
So
Okay.
we we take risk in the military sharing data because often sometimes people's lives are in danger. So the
Yeah.
authority to share it is delegated a little further, and the risk of what happens is acknowledged. But when lives are on the line, you share more information. The right to privacy is a critical thing. So how much data is being shared from vehicle to vehicle, from camera to camera, has to fall under international treaties and regulations, and things
Yeah.
like GDPR are there to protect us and give that oversight to the information that's being shared. Um, but when you have, video cameras and sensors everywhere tracking people, and the right to have your data protected starts to go out the window if we allow too much to happen. So I think it needs to be part of the conversation as we advance these tools, where the data lands, how it's being shared, and what's happening to it. Um, but when you apply AI tools to something, that oversight of your AI tool is a critical thing to make sure that we're doing what's right legally, morally, and ethically.
Another perfect segue. You're just teeing me up for them. Um, can let's talk AI. Go on, let's do it. Without showing, well, you didn't mention ethics, but without showing too much into ethics, I'd like to just hop back into the military world before we go back to commercial. Um, Obviously, AI can speed up decision making. Um, and I assume you're going to say a human still needs to be in the loop. But can you talk to me a little bit about how AI is speeding up decision making, or just securing and transferring data, and then what the policies that you know of are around using that AI?
So I think the first thing is there's a ton of information, and there are lots of evolving large language models and AI tools that can be applied to information. Knowing what question you want to ask and where that information exists in the first place. You ask a question that's irrelevant, you get all kinds of random answers from the system. It can't solve what you need to know if you don't know what you need to know. So starting from informed decision makers who know how to use the tools, and then connecting the right data sources to it securely, and protecting the information as you aggregate significant amounts of information. Um, when you start to use the tools, sometimes you can automate a response, and you can allow AI to identify things because it's now been trained to do certain levels of automation. Once you've
Yeah,
trusted and validated that its automated response is going to be okay, and an acceptable level of risk, then you can start to have the human oversight of it, because really it still falls under our control. Those are our tools that may do something. Um, but the ability to take a trained model and have it look for things of interest to drive a decision uh, can take what a person would do in, a group of soldiers looking at information would take 3 weeks to comb through and identify, are there threats coming from this direction? What do we identified over here? How do we manage the relationships in these towns while we still try and defend against, a threat coming in? You can now take that information and generate a heat map and options in the system automatically in a matter of hours or minutes,
yeah.
depending on how
Well,
much information. If you already have pulled the information in, if you're looking for it, it's the speed you're transferring the information to then analyze it to say, oh, we've identified a threat that has been here, here, and here. Now, do you want to take an action against it? You have these resources available to go and address that threat. What do you want to do? And then make a decision, as opposed to spending all your time just trying to find the information.
so in your view, is it more used for large quantities of data to be made on decisions that take longer time, or is there real world quick, like we need to make a decision right now and AI helps with that, or is it the longer time frame decision making that it supports?
So it is both, because now we can make decisions much faster by getting the right information presented quicker.
Yeah,
And with that speed and velocity of analysis, synthesis, and then presentation, you can acknowledge whether you have all the right information or not first. But second, you can say, all right, given that these resources, I have this much fuel, these many vehicles, they have this much medical support. When I put them at risk by putting them out into this location, I can reallocate resources to support and defend that area that I'm moving forces from. That second and third order impacts of what you otherwise are going off of experience and lessons learned. And,
yeah,
I've synthesized manually the information. I can display it. I can ask a question of the system. If I move these troops to go over here to help protect this school, what happens behind it? Well, this is how much fuel, food, resources you're going to need to move in, how many more people and units, and we recommend this, this, and this
yeah,
to fill those gaps. The system can do that calculation if you've trained it to do it and ask those scenarios before. And now it's starting to get to the point that it can make those informed recommendations and learn from what you make as decisions based on that.
yeah. That makes total sense. And would it in the non-military world, is there a quicker or is there a high readiness to embrace AI in this decision chain, do you think?
I think that if people aren't embracing it and verifying the
Falling
information they
behind.
get from it, they're behind.
Yeah,
So yesterday was the day to be using AI and
yeah,
learning from it, because um, whether you're doing coding or you're trying to make something better or asking questions about, how your business is doing in a sector or market, or what options you have, where should you be leaning with your company or with your business. If you're not asking the questions out of AI and taking that as a good input and giving it the right sources to ask those questions from, then you're missing something that will automatically give you information that you can internalize too.
yeah. Perfect. So moving on slightly, but maybe not fully. Um, I want to ask you about enterprise, the enterprise world, um, and yeah, the commercial world. I want to tie it in from the battlefield to the boardroom. And so I kind of want to know what battlefield lessons could we apply immediately to enterprise security. So what have you learned over the past 2 decades that we could apply to enterprise?
I think one of the most important things that I've seen is trusting and verifying information and decisions of the people that work for and with you, because none of us can do these things alone. So when
Hmm.
you're managing an enterprise services, you can consolidate all the power roles and responsibilities to the headquarters, and only a few select people can fix problems. Or you can apply a process and oversight that allows many layers below it, like the user, to reset their own access,
Yeah,
but then you have oversight and validation of what they're doing and power down to people to make changes on the network to identify what they need done, but then validate what's happening all the way back to the enterprise and have visibility of everything that's happening below you, not necessarily direction on it, because the best ideas come from the people at the edge. And when they're empowered to make changes, and you do that within a risk framework that you can assess and see and have visibility over, which is where all those data sensors and fusion for user behavior analytics come in. What are they doing on my network? How do I look at that as a total picture? And how can I deliver better services that are secure? Because that whole old, the good old CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It's a three-legged stool that if I protect all the information and it's not accessible, I am not doing what I need to do. There's a level of
yeah,
risk,
absolutely.
but understanding that risk is the key thing. So empower the people below you to do things, but have visibility over what they're doing. And then use that as your guidepost for what you need to do next. So to drive your strategic, goals and objectives
Yeah,
should be
yeah.
what is delivering value to my team and to the people that I support.
Brilliant. Lovely. Um, so probably the last question, I think. Thank you very much for all of this, by the way. But if you could give one principle for securing mission critical data, what would it be?
Risk. Identify the risk and then manage that to an acceptable level. So the principle behind it is what tools can I apply to take information, secure it, and share it with the right people, but know what those risks of when I share that information are there and be able to analyze that risk and get a better risk-based decision on sharing. Because at the end of the day, when you have data and you protect it all the way, it means nothing if you haven't shared it with people to do something with. But you also don't want to share too much information in the wrong spots, because
Yeah,
if you do, you've now created a risk to people, your business, uh, the force that's out there, like the geolocation of a person on a battlefield that might be attacked. Um, I equate that to the personal, identifiable information that is private to a person in their normal life, so that when I leave my home, I know my home is secure.
yeah,
I'm taking a risk driving down the road and getting to work, but I'm doing that and managing the risk along the way. When you share data and you process it and you use AI tools, know what is happening with the information that you put into that system and who else can have access to it. Because as the systems grow, uh, those risk guardrails aren't necessarily there till we've seen something happen. So
love
protect your information, but don't protect it all the way. Take risk.
it. Very clear. Right. Thank you so much for joining me, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure. Um, I We will have another of these Fox forums. It's the first Wednesday of every month. Last time I said it was Tuesday, but it's the first Wednesday of every month. I will have another excellent speaker with me. Um, I can't tell you who it is yet, but I can tell you
It's a secret.
it's a secret for now. I'm giving you some of the information, but not all of it. It's a risk. But the topic might be, or might not be AI. So please join us then. This time next month. Thank you very much, and see you then.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Jack.
Tom.